Hey everyone, my name is Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us for the Undignified podcast, where we talk about worship, the church, and everything else. Today I have the amazing opportunity to talk to Mike O'Brien. Now, Mike is someone who has led worship all over the place, and he's trained and discipled worship leaders all over the place, and he's very involved with the Vineyard movement, which my church just joined up with. But before we joined up with Vineyard, I was following Mike on all of the social media platforms, listening to his tips and stories and tutorials all about leading worship. So his voice has been really impactful in my life, and having this conversation is a huge blessing to me, and I know it's going to be a huge blessing to you. So let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. I am here with someone that I've actually been able to chat with a few times, that I respect, that I appreciate. I'm here with my friend, Mike O'Brien, fellow Vineyard worship pastor, worship leader. Give us the how are you doing, man? How are you?
Hey, man, I'm good. It's a nice early summer morning here in Atlanta, and doing well.
So you're in Atlanta. How long have you been there?
Pretty much my whole life. I grew up in Detroit first 10 years of my life, and then moved down here in the mid 80s with the migration of jobs back in the day. So I'm 3/4 Southern, 4/5 Southern, something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. So I started my life in Florida. Don't hold that against me. Well, that's technically not true. I started in Memphis, Tennessee at the ripe age of 2, decided it was time to move on to bigger and better things. Family went to Florida, and I was in the South for the first 20 years of my life. Now I'm in New York City, and our context, I guess, I would assume just couldn't be more different, both living in, bustling cities, but, I'm
Sure.
way up north, you're way down south, but you tend to be someone who actually moves around a bit. I know that you are a huge believer in the local church, but you do, more is the wrong word, but you go beyond just local. Can you kind of just explain to us what it is you do in your own words?
Sure. Yeah, I am a equipper of the church. I like to develop musicians and worship leaders. I'm a coach of worship leaders, and increasingly a consultant of churches and pastors, just helping them solve oftentimes what is a worship problem or a music problem in the church. That's what I do. I like to help and equip, but kind of like the bar rescue guy or the prophet guy. Not too dissimilar to that. I like to come in and just kind of assess what's going on. Oftentimes I'll do this beforehand, before I get there, or sometimes I never enter into a building, but I just have relationship with worship leaders and churches, and help coach and walk through this current climate that we're in, trying to figure it out.
So you said a few things there that I really think speak some truth into really some of the things I want to talk to you about a little bit deeper. But first, for instance, the current climate we find ourselves in, I think that's interesting language.
Sure.
I kind of want to, I'd love to hear just a few war stories of some of the things that you've encountered, or, success that you've experienced,
Sure.
or, tips, tricks, things like that. But I want to address two things first. I want to hear how you became a worship pastor involved in church and things like that. But I cannot get past the fact that we're basically twins right now.
Yeah, man.
I think it needs to be addressed. For anyone watching, it's double the handsome. I mean, was this planned? Did you what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, who's your great grandpa? I mean, who knows? We need to compare our DNA testing thing, whatever that thing's called. Figure out what's going on.
Yeah, we might need to 23andMe this or something. But do me a favor, tell me just a little bit how did you become a church guy, a worship leader, a worship pastor?
Yeah.
Just your version of the story.
My story of faith is really fascinating. When I moved from Detroit to Atlanta, I did so with my mom and my sister and this guy that brought my mom down to Atlanta, and he was going to marry her, but he ended up not marrying her, but he did abuse her for many years. And so I lived in this domestic abuse situation as a little boy. And one day we started going to church, and we found a little local Presbyterian church, PCA church, that took us under their wing. And one day they came and rescued us from this home. And
Wow.
it was a big deal. I mean, it completely transformed our lives, and this local church helped us. And the music minister took me under his wing and let me play bass and saxophone along with the hymns. And I think at that point we might have been starting to play Awesome God and Shine Jesus Shine. But it was still pretty, vintage worship. But the music minister basically led me to faith on the worship stage. And that transformed my life. And he mentored me, taught me how to write songs, taught me how to lead others. And I came to faith and became a better leader in this little Presbyterian church. And then when I was 18, joined the Vineyard Church, which is even more rock and roll and cool in the mid 90s. And they did the same thing. They mentored me and shepherded me and helped plant a church, and was a worship pastor for 20 years in one church under one pastor. So that's kind of where it led me. That was my experience up until 2016, when I left that 20-year assignment and began consulting, training, equipping the church at large. And that's what I've been doing for 7-8 years now, is traveling, training, equipping the church at large in worship ministry. So, yeah.
That's amazing. Are you on staff at a local church?
I'm not. So ever since that assignment ended with the church here in Marietta, Georgia, I just freelance. I've been starting my own company, right? But I've always been rooted in the local church. I know that that's the right answer. I know that's the answer people want, and it's also the answer I want in my spiritual leaders. Is like, who's your irritating pastor that shepherds you? What sermon do you fall asleep under? Who's leading you into worship, right? What dumb, crazy small group are you attending that drives you bonkers, right? That's what I want from my leaders. So that's what I'm going to do with my life to the best of my ability, is be in the game of church and and I say game, I mean, I use this language, but it's really, I want to be in with the people as I'm leading the people. So yeah, my local church is here in Atlanta, a little Vineyard Church, meets at 4 p.m. on a Sunday with a rug and 2 Bose speakers. I'm a part of the team that leads there, but I'm not the main worship leader. And yeah, it's great. So that's my anchor, my home church. And then from there, I'm able to travel and train and teach and do lots of other things. So.
Well, I first want to say, man, I'm so sorry. I'm sure you've, hopefully you've been able to deal with the past. I just recently went on a 3-month sabbatical because
Amazing.
my pastor could tell that I was just burnt to a crisp.
Yeah.
And he was right. And during that time, I saw both a therapist and a psychiatrist and a career coach and a sabbatical coach. So I'm a huge believer in like I was just telling you, I just took a bunch of my worship leaders to a retreat. And one of the first things I told them was, within this 24-hour period, if you hear me say anything, it's that your mental, emotional, spiritual, and physical health are way more important to me than you doing well on a Sunday. So I just want to say I'm so sorry that you had to go through that. I'm so glad that there was a community there that scooped you up, but I don't want to just skim past that, because that's hard. And I'm sure it shaped a lot of who you are, and experience shapes us. Our past comes with us at times, and so I just wanted to address that, and I wanted to kind of ask,
Thank you.
It seems as if you became a consultant, maybe your own version of a therapist, worship ministries. Sick segue, Murph. Great job. You became somewhat of a coach to worship ministries on your own before Vineyard was asking you to do it kind of like officially. I may be wrong about that, but is that something you kind of developed on your own?
Yeah, I think the first time I saw it was this worship leader, Scott Underwood, Like in the year 2000, I was 3 or 4 years into a vineyard, 2 or 3 years into a church plant. And I saw Scott Underwood stand on the stage and he taught worship leaders. Like I knew all the spiritual things that you were supposed to do, but he would say, hey, hold your guitar like this. When you're welcoming people in, play softly, and then just begin to use your voice to help the people. And most of the church would call this cheerleading, or they would call this, like disingenuous, like just let the Spirit move. You don't need to do any talking. But Scott taught us how to just be good hosts, to say, welcome, we're so glad you're here. If you've never been here, here's something that we're about to do. Just a very kind way, not like super hyped up, like some of what you see in seeker-sensitive churches, but it was just very, very sensitive to the room, and it would change depending on the room. But he taught the worship leaders how to do it, just the practical. And as he was doing it, I was just like, I love this. I love this practical part of just saying, hey, your head tilts a little bit, or the way you say that is weird, or you're constantly smacking your lips in between your prayer. just like helping worship leaders figure out, hey, there's a few practical things that if you tidy those things up, the spiritual things aren't going to be inhibited by tidying those things up. They might be accentuated. So yeah, I saw that in him. And then I saw some other consultancy type people that really inspired me, because I saw that they were actually helping the church. Like when they would leave, people would be like, I cannot believe we didn't do this sooner. This blew our mind and was so helpful, in a world where consultants and that sort of stuff get a bad rap. Like when it's done really well, it really helps the church. Like that inspires me. So yeah, that's what's helped me along the journey to want to do it.
Do you maybe I'm jumping too far ahead, but it seems like we're kind of in this place where everyone's a consultant in a way.
Sure.
Do you see, as someone who's been doing this for, you said like, I don't know, what was it, 10 plus years, something like that, even longer?
Well, I've been officially had the business for about 8 years, but really to your point, I've been doing it pretty much since I started leading. I almost wanted to begin teaching right away. Right. So I've always been that kind of person. Yeah.
Do you see any danger, not in what you do, but do you see any danger in that, like, church consultancy?
Sure.
And obviously anything in excess, it can be a problem. We're seeing that with all sorts of things coming out in media, et cetera. But do you ever find yourself going, man, it seems like everybody's doing this now?
Sure.
Or is it something that you're just like, it's still pretty niche?
I think it's cool that people want to give away information and want to help. You see a lot of people start this and then they don't keep it up because they're not called to do it. But like I'm just finishing up doing the sound design and the installation on a new building, a new church building. And I feel like the freaking expert of the world. Like I am, I know just this morning I figured out what's the perfect length for a headphone cable extension to go from the P16 to your ears for the average 4-foot person and the 6-foot person. So I am an expert in that right now. And on the tail end of this, for the next 6 months, I'm going to remember all that information. I'm going to want to give it away. So I think that's good. I think that's so good that people have those. And even if it's just for a season, like you're like, man, I've learned something and I want to give this away. I think it's good as long as you come with humility, as long as you come with, I could be wrong. I don't know everything, but here's something I just learned. Right. So I think that's helpful in the church. Where it's not helpful is where people get bored in the local church with their local gig. And then they think, I just got to start doing something. Right. So they start teaching on top of that, or the royalties start to dry up for like a legacy CCM artist. And they're like, well, let's start a school. There's some money in that. They don't say that there's some money in this, but that's what they're thinking. Their subconscious is going there. So, just to be wary of that. Like, are you called to this? Is this a calling, or is this like a little temporary gig assignment, where you'll write a book or you'll do a little podcast? I think those things are fine, but don't fake it for too long, because it's not even work. It doesn't even pay that well. Like teaching and music and ministry. Those are all the things that do not really do very well. So I just wait. It seems like a quick thing to grab some attention and get some energy, but it doesn't last very long if you're not called to do it.
Well, let me ask this question then. Speaking of lasting long, being called to do it, etc.
Sure.
I found you and met you. Well, I found you on TikTok. Here's my Mike O'Brien, we're now best friends story. I found you on TikTok, because obviously these algorithms know what's in our brains and they know what we do. And we say the word worship out loud and all of a sudden Alexa is sending us guitar picks, suggestions or something. But I found you on TikTok just sharing information about worship teams. I do that locally. I have done that outside of my church, had some really cool opportunities. I aligned with what you do so quickly, and I actually found a way to contact you, email you, because I wanted to set up an interview like this where I just talked about, honestly, developing some stuff that I was thinking through. And I want to talk more about why I think that's important. But my question for you is, obviously, somebody who's been doing this 8+ years, ever since you've been in ministry, you've kind of shifted into teaching and training and equipping and resourcing. Have you found yourself as just a dude in the world being like, oh man, I've got to figure out TikTok. Now I've got to figure out this, and I've got to create a newsletter, and I've got to create these things, because I found you on probably one of the most popular social platforms in the world, of course. But do you feel the pressure of like, I have to start this, or I have to share this way? Or do you just gravitate towards those platforms anyway?
Yeah, I think I primarily do it, if I'm being honest. I do the social media thing because of my business, right? So I'm not one worship pastor in a local church. I did that for a really long time. I kind of secretly want your life, right? I would like to go back to that. There's a part of that I'm like, oh my gosh, this would be great. And there's some other reasons for that. But the reason why I do it is to just let the world know, hey, I'm open for business. Here I am. If you need my help, here's a sampling of my help, right? If you want one-on-one coaching, I do that on Zoom. If you want me to come to your church and hang out for a weekend, I'm not a rock star. I don't have a hit song, but I can really help you develop musicians. And you can cry on my shoulder, and I'll know exactly, not exactly how you're feeling, but I'm maybe know more than most people would. So it's advertisement, right? But I also like it. I feel like I need to write a book, but I don't have the diligence to sit down and write the book. So some of this feels like just chapters of the book that I'm wanting to get out. But if I was just in one local church with 23 souls under my care, that could or should take up a majority of my time. And they would be getting my TikToks, right? They would be getting my information and my energies. Not to say you couldn't have extra. I think a lot of people have been in this long enough to where they do need a little bit more, and they do have more they can give away to others. So, but yeah, that's the heart behind social. And it's so cool. Like the other day I did my first TikTok live in the middle of the day, and 50 people jumped on, and then it whittled down to like 4 people. And basically what I was doing was I was creating a set list, and I was wrestling through whether I wanted to add this particular Maverick City song. I was wrestling through it, and I wanted to wrestle through that live with everybody. Like, why would I choose to do this song or not do this song? And this one kid, I think the only kid that was paying attention, was like, I'm brand new. And that was so awesome. Thank you so much for walking through that. I'm like, all right, there it is. One person was reached in this, and that felt really good. That was like my dream.
You left the 99. You went after the one. I had a similar situation where I did a YouTube live, and I was doing the same exact thing. I was building a set list and just like, this is interesting to me. And I think it might be, I actually don't even know if I thought it would be helpful. I honestly was the guy that like, hey, maybe people will watch that, and I was just playing in my set list and I actually have like, I walked through this with my worship leaders this past weekend, where I just said, if you don't know how to create set lists, here's how you do it. You continue to tell the story that God has been telling for years anyways.
I like
Creation, fall, redemption, renewal. Creation, A sun comes up. It's a
Yeah.
new day dawning. Fall. Are you hurting and broken within? Overwhelmed by the weight of your sin? Redemption. Same song. Oh, come to the altar. And then renewal. God is renewing all things. All the earth will shout your praise. That's how you write a set list. And then I told him, I was like, and don't overthink it. If you like a song, here's the rule at Wellspring, my church. Play it. Like, if you like the song, play it. We're not going to overthink it, and we can talk about it later. And then, and I said, and how do we talk between songs? If you don't know, don't do it.
Yeah.
Use scripture. That's all you do.
Yeah.
That's all you do. And as I'm walking through like set list building, I become kind of passionate, like I'm becoming now. And I'm like, and there were some people that were like, this, I never thought of this. And it was so, I think there are certain people that are designed to teach, to share. And it's one of the things I wanted to talk to you about. And I'm sorry that, I asked to interview you, but I'm talking so long. I wanted to get your take on this because when it comes to training, teaching, resourcing, and equipping worship teams and worship leaders specifically, or actually let's just say ministry leaders, kids, worship, welcome, guest care, whatever you want to call it. I've found that there is a disparity between resources provided to senior leadership and ministry-specific leadership.
Sure.
Do not get me wrong. I believe every senior pastor needs resources, needs equipping, needs a break, needs a sabbatical.
Sure.
But when it comes to ministry-specific leadership, you have is A, learning on your own and failing forward, which works, or B, going to the huge church that shows you how to do something that you probably cannot reproduce.
Sure.
That's my take. So I'd love to know your thoughts on that. And I'd love to know if you're like, yeah, same boat, or no, I don't necessarily agree. Is there a reason within that tension that you find yourself doing what you do?
Yeah, I'm filling the gap that often a lot of the denominations have left wide open, which boggles my mind. I asked a question on TikTok the other day of like the Southern Baptist Church convention, whatever it is, right? I mean, there's an office somewhere, right, with 194 employees. I'm guessing, right? I would imagine it's is there one employee that's like singularly focused on going after the music and worship community, right? Like gathering up all the organists for a retreat. Like, I mean, maybe there is, maybe there is, right? But I've looked a lot and it just doesn't seem like there's all the different tribes and the different streams. There's usually 5 church planting people or 23 missions people, tons of pastor people, tons of preaching conferences, leadership conferences. But hey, let's just gather our musicians, our worship leaders, and let's bless them and hang out and give them, $5 Starbucks card and pray for them, right? Like, I know it's happening in some places, but it's mostly been left up to the parachurch. So like Todd Fields has this worship circle thing he does in North Atlanta. He's scratching that itch. There's other, 10,000 fathers is scratching the itch, and mothers, 10,000 fathers and mothers is scratching the itch, training across the board, which is great. So I'm filling in that vacuum. I wish that the streams would pay more attention to their own stream because I think the values get real jumbled and weird. Like you're at the Aaron Keys conference and you're tilting your head because it's like, this is Aaron Keys' version of the truth. Or you come to my vineyard thing because I help the vineyard churches, and the Baptists are tilting their head going, I don't know. Right. I mean, and that's fine. But I think that each stream needs to care for their own. And then, yes, we need to go to the full things. But yeah, I mean, people take these pilgrimages to these larger conferences. They just did one in Passion, called Lift, which is great. People come back and they're like, I got some stuff from it. But that's not what I do. I mean, I go in and I singularly focus on that team in that city. And I much prefer that method.
Yeah.
Not that you're not even getting my version of the truth, but I'm just partnering with you and saying, Patrick, tell me about NYC, tell me about the city, tell me about your church. Okay, let me come alongside and partner with you to do some training and equipping of your people,
I'm taking that as a complete offer, not just an anecdote. So sold.
Come on. I'd love to.
I completely agree. And I need to actually, you absolutely should. I was talking to Adam Russell, who we both know, who's in Vineyard Worship as well. And he was like, I want to come out to New York and hang. I was like, dude, come on, figure it out, you know? And my pastor's way into that as well. So we should, now it's been recorded in history, we should figure it out. But to brag about you a little bit, one thing that, you know, for the 12 people that watch and or listen to this, the testament to what you do, I got to see firsthand. I go to, our church has become a Vineyard church. I'm coming straight off sabbatical, and I found out that there's like a Vineyard National Worship retreat. And I was like, I just knew in the back of my head, having been involved with like, you know, I was like, this is going to be weird. It's going to be small. It's going to be fun. Let's go meet some people. Such a good time. And the amount of people I ran into there that were brand new to worship was astounding. And there was this young man named Ben. He went to your breakout where you literally one by one, I was actually sitting in another breakout 4 feet away from yours going, I should have gone to that one. I should have gone to it. And watching or listening as you were actually having these worship leaders, as long as they were comfortable, come up and actually lead a song and then lovingly saying, hey, here's some stuff that you're going to walk away with that you can implement right now that's going to make you more comfortable, better, stretch yourself a little bit. And he walked away from that going, I never knew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 things. So I'm completely with you that there is, or actually, let's just address the fact that there is a gap, there is a disparity, there is a vacuum there where there's a bunch of, you know, people like you and me who are probably somewhat musically gifted that a pastor said, you should be a worship leader. And they're like, sure, and have no idea what they're doing. And they just don't have the resources available. Yeah. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, Patrick, like most churches, most of what's happening out there looks nothing like the highlight reel that we see, right? It's not even close. Like, not even like the jokes that worship leader probs posts of like people messing up lyrics or whatever, like even though like that, those are still in the top 10%, right? Like there's like so many more layers of basic and like it would boggle people's mind, but most people don't even go to those churches. They just drive past them, but there's thousands of them that are just basic. They're not sophisticated at all. They're literally in 2001. Some, Patrick, I'm not kidding you. There's a church in Atlanta I helped out for a minute. 300 members, tons of money, tons of resources. Literally 1988, and nobody's. You know, they might have had a guitar player once or twice in the past 25 years. So there's so many churches that are getting left in the dust that have not been. They've not been helped and not been served, and there's really nothing for them other than to watch the big boys do their big boy thing. The larger churches and the larger movements, which are great and fantastic, but there's so many smaller churches that just need a little help. They need a little helping hand. They don't need a massive cannonball of worship glory in their face, right? They just need a little help, you know.
Can I ask you to expand on that? So when you say someone is stuck in 1988, I think that many people will hear you saying different things. So can you just stretch that out just a bit? Is it production value? Is it song selection? Do those things even matter? What's your take?
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of churches just hit pause at some point. Like they can't develop it anymore. They can't do all the new things and the new songs. So they just stick with what's comfortable. And a lot of times a pastor will hire or ask a volunteer worship person to do something. And part of the deal is, okay, I'll do this for you and you're not going to pay me what I deserve. So I'm just going to do it on my terms. And my terms might be 1988. That might be my comfort zone of the way I'm going to lead worship, right? I'm not going to develop anybody or anything or any songs because I don't have enough energy. My energy allows me to give you what I'm comfortable with. So a lot of churches are stuck in that place, and the pastor is just like, all right. And the church just get used to it. You know, the frog is boiling in the water. And there's nothing wrong with 1988. I mean, it's great. Like, you could just stay there, but it's not evangelistic. It's not when somebody walks into the church, the things that move people in 1988 don't necessarily move people in 2023, different generations. So, yeah, there are some considerations, right? That would be helpful. So that's just the reality of what's going on in the church I've seen as I've traveled and moved around.
That's a really interesting take. And I love how the first thing you said was you didn't say there's not a development of systems or sound or all these things that I think are actually important. But the first thing you said was there's not a development of people.
Yeah.
I completely agree. I was having a conversation with, a full-time worship pastor. We are few and far between. And I told him how much I cared about discipling new worship leaders in our church. And, for anybody that doesn't know, like looking around the room at my team, I care very deeply that my team is a bunch of people who are more gifted than me, but also don't look like me. Yeah. And don't sound like me. I think that at some point you have to start with, this is what I know how to do. So for a while you're going to be me, but at some point I hope that you're you. And to see on my worship leading team that there are people of color, that there are women, that we sing in different languages when we can, I'm just like, I think that's important because that's what heaven's going to look like. Yeah. A whole conversation for another day maybe. But this person, I was telling him about, how I cared so much about discipling worship leaders, and he said, how often do they lead? I said, man, a couple times a month we've got somebody up there that's not me. I might be in the band. I'm definitely there. I'm present. I'm supporting. They show up to a set up stage and I'm like, here's your in-ear pack. What can I do for you? But he said to me, I think if there was anybody else on stage besides me leading worship, my church would probably say, what are we paying you for?
Yeah.
And here comes Mike O'Brien with the hot take. Hit me.
Well, that's essentially how I lost my job, was after 20 years of faithfully serving a medium-sized church and growing the team, like a 300-member church with 50 people in the worship ministry, 4 bass players, 6 drummers, 6 sound techs, 6, 7, 8 people that could lead worship on stage. No problem. Like, other churches would call and be mad at me because we had so many. They'd be like, send me one. I'd be like, bro, they're not going to move to come hang out with you. So I love to develop, right? And that's my heart to develop. It literally cost me my job because eventually the finance team, when churches go through hard times, they look to things to cut and they go, well, Mike, we've got plenty. We need to cut Mike loose because we can't afford him. But he's, thank you for leaving us, all these people, right? So, and that's fine. I feel like that's part of the gig, right? That was part of what was happening in that church in that particular time, because the church would have needed to grow to 1,000 or 1,500 to really for that to make sense, And I know that sounds a little arrogant, and I'm not even sure I could work in that size of a church, and the things that I like to do would work in that context, but it worked me out of a job in a smaller church. So it's dangerous because to give away the best gig is hard. But worship leaders, you're going to get sick. You got to skip some Sundays. You got to go on vacation. You got to at the bare minimum, you got to develop some people. You got to give some people a chance. And if your church is 100 people, you've got 1 trombone player, 1 clarinetist. You probably got 2 decent songwriters. You got a couple sound techs, a couple engineers, right? So you're probably going to have 1 or 2 people that could do this thing that we do. And it's not rocket science. And you need to be able to carry a tune and start a song, and that'll get a lot of the work done. So develop people, replace yourself, find people that you can get. And like you said, I think it's going to be their version of them. It's not going to be them, but a lot of the modeling is just, hey, coming alongside, a lot of co-leading, I think is the gateway to this, is just, hey, you sing a verse of this one song.
Yep.
That's the beginning. You take the verse out, verse, chorus, bridge, last chorus, right? You take the whole song. Hey, what song do you think we should do next week? I don't know. Nobody's ever asked
that's
me.
empowerment.
Nobody's ever
Now,
asked me.
now you're talking. Now you're talking about empowerment. Can I interrupt you for one second? I just did, but do you mind if I interrupt you? I was talking about a friend of mine because obviously our nation and our world is going through some a lot of things are coming to the surface, especially when it comes to race. And I spoke to my friend Macho, who's a Latino, phenomenal worship leader. And I was like, Macho, look at me.
Sure.
I got some stuff to learn. Just by looking at me, I know I have some stuff to learn. I said, here I am in the most diverse. I'm not only in the most diverse city, I'm in the most diverse area of the city.
Yeah.
And I'm in Queens. And I said, help me. And he said, here's the thing, Patrick. He said, I see you giving people that don't look like you tasks. Have you ever asked them, have you ever gotten to the point where you're able to ask them, but what do you want to do? He said, that's empowerment.
Yeah.
That's a place at the table. So when you say like, hey, what you, Mike, when you say, so what do you want to do? I think that's a step.
Yep.
That's the scariest step, because now you're asking someone, what do you want me to become comfortable with so I can help you do it? As opposed to, I'm going to let you do my thing. Anyway, sidebar. I just think that's really important. That's good. That's good.
And in worship leader world, you're not saying, hey, what's one song you want to do? You say, hey, what are 5 songs you think would be good in this moment? That way, when they actually do respond to you, you're not stuck by saying, it's not a binary response, but you're able to say, ooh, I like that third idea you had. Let's talk about that. Let's use it, right? So there's tricks of the trade of developing others that just creates space for them to grow and to have a victory. And yes, we got to beg, borrow, steal, fight to get diverse voices, people that are not like ourselves. That's the hard part, Patrick. I mean, my gosh, trying to get an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, it's just a whole new game. Like the Gen X things that worked don't work now. And you got to figure out a way to make space for these folks and to disciple them. Yeah. It's been a huge challenge, but it feels more of a challenge with the generational gap than it does with the racial and gender gap, to be perfectly honest with you right now.
Oh, sure. I mean, I can completely see, depending on context and stuff, I can totally see that. And everybody's coming out of their own, like, this is my struggle. This is my story. This is what I'm working on. I do want to disagree with one thing you said, but I think when I explain myself, you're going to agree right back to me. So you said, we need someone who can carry a tune. You got to be able to play. One thing that I realized where I was totally missing opportunities when it came to raising up worship leaders is I was waiting until I'm like, well, this person is spiritually gifted. Mm-hmm. They hear the voice of the Lord. They can lead a song, but they can't play guitar. And then I went, well, what if instead of just developing worship leaders, I was also developing music directors, which is a thing. And if, anybody's not listening, not to get too practical or nerdy, when my church is playing on stage, we always have someone with a mic in front of their face that only goes to our in-ear monitors. And so it's that worship leader that maybe isn't gifted playing an instrument, but is gifted in leading songs. They are able to focus out. They're able to focus on the people. They're able to lead the worship. And it's the music director's job to plan the set right alongside them, to understand the direction of the day. And I know adding more voices like that gets messy. They're allowed, both the worship leaders and the music directors are allowed to fail. We call them family moments. If you haven't failed in a while, well, come on, man. What do? We got to make some mistakes here and there. But it's their job to go, I'm going to do my very best to know what that person wants to do and read their mind. And it's been able to help me get more people on stage that in the past I would say, well, you can't play anything. You can't lead worship, which I think obviously we both agree is like, well, that's not true, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I think having like, if somebody's like an encourager and like there's this guy at this one church I serve here in Atlanta. He is such an encourager. He comes in with a smile. He high fives everybody. He is the life of the party. He's maybe a C minus drummer, and he knows it.
You went down.
He knows it. but he's so good to the team. Like his gifts on the team are leadership, right? I'll put him on a team that I know needs to be lifted and picked up. That's part of the game. And then, yeah, to your point, like a drummer could lead the whole team, and they might not sing a lick, right? That'd be great. And here's another hot take, which is a little to the left of what we're talking about, but this has been huge for me. This understanding of, and maybe somebody's already written a book about it, but the responsibility of worship in the congregation is the people, the gathered church. It's their gig. I'm in charge of starting the engine, but like they've got to go. They've got to do it. So, and that's why I'm becoming less and less like the proficiency of the worship leader is a conversation, but really, what's the proficiency of the gathered people? Like, have they been trained, commissioned, reminded that this is your gig, folks? Like, I'm a show pony up here, but not a lot. Like, this is your thing. Biblically, this is your responsibility, not the priest, not the sexy worship leader guy, but you guys got to come to do the work. So pick up a shovel, grab an oar. We've grabbed ours earlier. We're steering, we're motivating, we're moving, but we're not going anywhere unless everybody rows. So
no,
yeah,
that's really good. You pointed out two things that I want to address. One, you said sexy worship leader. Obviously, you're talking about you and me. Second thing is that I was reading a book from a worship pastor leader, some one of those worship books that I really, really love. And they said, I once stepped up to the mic and said, one of those classic, like, who's ready to worship the Lord this morning? And someone yelled from the back row, that's your job. And I'm right there with you. Like, I am someone who believes it is our job to teach. Why? Because you'll go on stage as a worship leader and say, lift your hands, raise your voice, and then I'll also use all these phrases that no one knows what you're talking about, like sing your own song, without ever explaining any of those things, without ever saying, well, one of the Hebrew words for praise is tehillah, which means an unrehearsed song. And when we read the scripture, you are enthroned upon the praises of your people. We are talking that the word that is used is tehillah. So apparently, if we believe what the Bible says, God shows up not when you sing the lyrics behind me that I'm gesturing to, but God shows up when we sing out like, life is hard, but I'm still here, and I really like you, and I hope you like me. And if you're worshiping and praising, I don't know, I could go on a stump speech about that. I'm completely with you that we need to teach people, as we're also teaching pastors, not just worship pastors. I think that's important. Yeah. And that's a lot of what you do.
Yeah, I think that's huge. I've just been, as I've been leading recently, I've just been lifting off the weight of expectation that I move the room. I make it happen. Because I know that I can make it happen. Nobody talks about this, but like the greater your musical gift is, you can make it happen. Josh Baldwin, Jen Johnson, John Mark McMillan, if they want to turn it up, we know the magic of theater. We know how to do it. We can make it happen. Phraseology, certain things, we can stir the room. Even if it begins kind of selfishly, God can use it and pick up, right? I mean, in a Pentecostal space or charismatic space. But I've been carrying less and less of that responsibility and trying to choose songs and lead songs in a way that they only work if people participate. To your point, the phrases we use, lift your voice. I am retiring. Come on, church. Come on, church. That would be a great podcast. Like 25 phraseologies we could retire. Come on, church. That one grinds me now, but I did it for years.
I hear you.
Come on, church guy.
Change it to giddy up, church.
Come on. I used to get really mad. Like when I had these thoughts younger that were undeveloped, I'd be like, come on. worship. I was really angry. You know, when you get angry, the people aren't doing anything. That's a
Yes,
bad spot to be.
I once, as a middle school worship leader, I wasn't in middle. I was leading the middle school youth. I was the next gen worship pastor, which whoever came up with that thing, that phrase really bothered me. It's a thing now. And I walked out on I was in Orlando, Florida, and I walked out on this huge catwalk because, we were left as the middle school ministry and the youth ministry with whatever they were using for Sunday sets, whatever gear was set up. That's what we had to work with. So it was this huge catwalk. And of course I'm like, amazing. And I walk out there and we were playing, if you can remember it, Chris Tomlin's "Not to Us, but to Your Name."
Sure.
And the kick, boom, boom, boom. And I walk out on the catwalk, and me as like a 18-year-old, I grab the mic, 19-year-old, and I grab the mic and I go, "You know what, guys? Tonight we have two options. You're either worshiping God or the devil. Not to us." And at that point, I think just a "Come on, church" would have been better. That's the only scenario.
Jesus.
Well, I wanted to
Have mercy
Jesus.
on us
Have mercy
for all the
I actually got off stage. And the vocalist that was singing with me, I said, "Did I just tell a bunch of middle schoolers they might be worshiping the devil?" She goes, "Yeah, you did. Straight up. 100%.
So here's the thing, Patrick, like the memory, like the cringe level now of those certain things is 8 or 9 or 10. I wonder what was the cringe level in the moment? All things being equal, was it a 4 or a 5 or a 3? Were there like some seasoned grandpas in there that were just rolling their eyes, or were we all kind of in the stew and we don't have to beat ourselves up about it as much?
Well, to your point, someone was probably in the back room going, "Hey man, we don't pay him anything. What are we going to do?"
That's my only consolation for all the silly things.
Yeah. Well, I did want to ask, speaking of silly things, I did want to ask you, since you are I want to, as like we're kind of like wrapping up, there's some silly things I want to ask you, but there's also some serious stuff I want to ask you. But before we get to the serious stuff, like having traveled around so long, you have to have some horror stories. You have to have, and we can't use names, of course, and we can't. Do you have anything where you just walked into a church that said, "Please help us," and so you've been invited to go in? Do you just have any horror stories of like, "I can't believe this happened," or "This was said," or "This is what I saw"? You got to have something.
Yeah, it's you have enough horror stories when you're just anchored to one church. One guy, just a quick anecdote about that is one guy, instead of telling us that he wanted to quit the worship team, blocked himself out of planning center for I think 30 years. Like he set the blockouts for decades instead of like having the conversation of like, I need to quit. So
that's really good.
Within the local church, there's enough of that. But as you travel, I wish I wish my memory was better, and I wish I was one of those traveling writers that could explain what all the things, like the Andrew Bourdain of experience of worship, because there are so many hilarious horror stories, mostly just funny things, mostly things that are benign. So for instance, as I travel with churches, oftentimes I'll co-lead with the team, and they pick some songs, I pick some songs, and we just do it together. So the girl picked Holy Spirit, You Are Welcome Here, and in Planning Center, they picked the Kim Walker-Smith version or one of the 15-minute versions, And she, like on the second verse or the bridge, wherever the riffing was from Kim Walker, she literally sang that prophetic word over again. And this was like a Baptist church. This is like a very, it's not fundamentalist. It's always funny that Baptists sing Holy Spirit, You're Welcome Here, but like she just sang that whole thing. Not during rehearsal, but during church. And it was so perplexing to me. Like, that's not actually part of the song, but it was in the slides and everything. Like, it was popping up on the on the screen.
It was in the slides.
It was popping up on the confidence screen. I'm like, what?
Oh, all right.
So that was insane. And I just kind of stood there like, all right. And then
Did you actually have a conversation about it? Did you like?
I mean, it just happened in the moment. So I didn't even, I think there were two services, and the second service, I said, you don't have to do that. I mean, a prophetic word for then on the recording, maybe it's forever. I don't know. And then one time with a younger person, we talk about generational stuff. There was a musician that looked at me about an hour into the rehearsal and said, "Where's the music?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? Are your ears working? Like, is your monitors working?" "Oh yeah, I can hear everything." "Okay." She's like, "Where's the music?" And I said, we're making the music." And after some more questions, I just come to find out she meant, "Where's the track? Where's the tracks?" Because oftentimes when I work with teams that use tracks all the time, I say, "Hey, let's do a couple songs without tracks, and I'll show you."
Yes.
So, but she had never in her life played music without a track on stage ever.
What?
She's like 18 or something. So she said, "Where's the music?" She meant, "Where's the track?" And it was perplexing to her that we were creating this sound without canned sounds from a computer.
That's so interesting.
Yeah, like, all right, this is a whole new world, you know?
A whole new world. Wow, it's like I love your phrase. You're like, we're doing it. Like, we're doing it.
Yeah,
it's all us. Oh man. Well, I love asking this question on like episodes like this. Those are so funny. Thank you for sharing those. We could probably go all day with failing forward. Let's call it failing forward moments.
Sure.
But when I have episodes like this where I get to talk to other worship leaders or even pastors or leaders, one question I love to ask is, and especially I really want to hear this from you, is pretend you're on a hiring committee at a church. Maybe you've actually been in this role before where you're actually supposed to be helping actually hire a new worship leader.
Sure.
What are the things now in our given time? Like, what are the things, like a few tangible or intangible things, or even red flags you look for? What are some things you look for in a candidate? If anybody's out there, I think you get the question, but just to be more clear, like if anybody's out there and going like, I want to do this. Well, obviously there's practical, musicality, etc. But it's more than that. And what would you say are some of the things that you would look for in a candidate?
Yeah, I've done a lot of work with that increasingly. I mean, part of my job is to do interim work with churches. So churches that are looking for a worship leader, I'll become their worship leader. Their part-time interim worship leader. I'll run the whole ministry from my laptop and fly in and be there twice a month or 3 times a month. And then once we establish the worship ministry, bring some healing and help, we start to find a candidate. So I've been a part of successfully finding multiple candidates for churches. It's a much slower process, but it's been good. So part of what I'm looking for is, at least in this modern day, is obviously somebody with a teachable spirit. Somebody that is self-aware and others aware, like they know how they're built and how they tick. They know that they're the worship or the pastor, the senior pastor that's going to hire them, has a certain way about him or her and the way that they tick, and they understand like chemistry and how to work well with others, being aware of their own weaknesses, being aware of their own stuff. So self-awareness is almost close to the top to me. I think people that like to go slower and process with other people, give other people time to process, versus people that are like, we're going to change everything in 3 months. People that are willing to look at a 2 or 3, 4, 5 year process. Awareness, a wide understanding and appreciation of the church, capital C, and an understanding of like people are younger than them and older than them and how they encounter Jesus, and willingness to play songs that you don't like at all personally, willingness to be non-authentic on stage for the sake of the church, for the sake of the people, to shed off whatever your thing is. You know, my thing is I like Matt Redman songs. I like Hillsong vibes. I like the way I sing the song. No, I'm willing to sing it down 3 keys. I'm willing to give it away. I'm willing to sing that song I really just don't like at all. I don't connect with. Heck, maybe even I've struggled theologically with a line or two, but the pastor, the team want, you know, it's a song that needs to be sung for the church. Sign me up. You know, that's what I'm testing in candidates. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to grow? Are you willing to go to a conference or go to some training, listen to podcasts, read some books? Are you a lifelong learner? Those things are high on the list for me, than even the other musical things, you know.
That's really good. I love that you started with teachability. I think that's really, really important. I also wanted to ask you, like, you kind of got into this a little bit, and, you know, go as deep as you want on it, but like, you mentioned a couple things about how, you know, like the state of the church today. You've even made like, a TikTok recently, like past few months or whatever, where you were talking about like, I don't know the right terminology here, but like famous worship leaders, et cetera. And, you know, you said you were making the point, like, be yourself. Don't worry about being someone else. Great point. But there was a tinge of you being around, seeing the church. You even just mentioned understanding what the capital C church is.
Yeah.
And related to worship as much as you want, or just the church in general, is there some stuff you're seeing as you travel around that concerns you, excites you, all of the above, or any just like wisdom you want to contribute to all of the things already coming out that where we're realizing we need to learn some things, we need to grow in some areas, the capital C church that is. What's your take?
Well, I'm really encouraged. I think that a lot of certainly the pandemic has shaken off a lot of the fluff. For some churches, they added more technology, more anxiety to their services. And then they held on to all that. There's so much more that everybody's got to do all the time to keep things streamed and live. But another portion of the church, kind of, they did a little bit of that. You know, they downloaded all the stuff, but then they just kind of sold it. And they've gone back very simple in the round, more acoustic, less songs, less words, less needing to have a new song every week, right? So there's a lot of that out there, and that story's not getting told so much because there's also less money into the worship leader world. It's more volunteers. It's more people just kind of stepping up, like teams of 4 or 5 people just kind of helping the pastor get it done. And that's just the way things are. So there's a lot of really sweet things that are happening in that regard. There's a pure hunger. I went to Tuscaloosa a couple weeks ago with a church that just gathered like 15 people that were not songwriters, but they had a desire to create something new, but they just didn't know how to do it. They didn't even know how to begin the conversation, but they were hungry for it. And they all just got together and we wrote songs and laughed and had a really good time. And they started singing some of those songs in church already. Like, just some really sweet things like that. I would say on the negative side, I think the gadgets are telling us what to do more and more. For instance, a lot of worship leaders, they're beholden to the media lady that's running the slides, right? Because she doesn't want to mess up. So we can't mess up because she doesn't want to mess up. And we can't improvise because she doesn't want to mess up. So Becky running the slides is literally running the values of the church.
Interesting.
Is Becky there to serve us, or are we there to serve her? Everybody's going to say we should all be serving one another, but that's not actually the way it works in a modern production context. You kind of, spiritually, yes, but there's got to be a direction, right?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of worship leaders are just stuck, especially young worship leaders. They're stuck serving the systems that are put in front of them, and they can't explore anything. They can't change a song on Saturday if they sense the Lord doing that, because everything's already been dialed in, and that's pretty disappointing. And you go to more and more, you go to planning center, and hey, they just keep spoon feeding you the songs, most popular, top songs sung this week, what everybody's doing, it's just, they just keep spoon feeding it, and it's becoming harder to be creative and to say, what does my little church in my little city need this week? Oh, this is what the big okay, cool. But what does my little church need? So those are things that are a challenge, and I don't know if we'll ever fit. I want to show you something.
All right.
I found this, I stole this magazine from a friend's desk that was retiring. It's old school worship periodical from 1991. Here's the articles. This is mind-boggling. Writing usable praise and worship choruses. Breaking down barriers to worship. Using the guitar in worship. How far can it be taken? being the spouse of a worship leader. Cleaning your gutters. The making of a live audio tape, right? It's all the same freaking conversations we have today. Literally the same conversations. So I think the problems we've always had are going to be the problems we probably continue to have, just because it's church. It's messy. Things are not perfect. It's rock and roll before noon. It's age 0 to 99, making all these people find something to sing, so nothing new under the sun, but I thought that was interesting. Psalmist magazine. Find you one.
Psalmist, yeah, find you one. Get your subscription in. Man, that was so concise and so helpful. I'm really thankful for that. It's both like a warning and an encouragement all at the same time. I love that. You have this great ability of being I would say that you are so grounded and well-rounded in the way you teach, which I know is something that you do professionally. So it's amazing that I'm sitting here asking questions and receiving. So with that being said, as we kind of wrap up here, I want to give you the opportunity. Can you please tell people where can they find you? Where can they follow you? What do you want people reading, watching, seeing of what you're doing? And if anybody needs to contact you, how would they do that?
Yeah. TikTok, Instagram is Mike O Worship. And my business, my company is called 3 Streams Worship Training. So you can find me on there. Just like I look like Patrick, my name, Mike O'Brien, there's also another Mike O'Brien dude in the worship space. There's also a Saturday Night Live Mike O'Brien. So there's a few of us out there, but I'm the 3 Streams Worship Training one. So yeah, I do. I've got training opportunities open. I've got a couple slots in the fall where I could come to a church and hang out. I've been doing this worship team masterclass thing where I come into a city and a bunch of churches assemble and hang out. So I'm developing a few things that, some of those things are on my website and on my socials. And I'm also increasingly doing worship leader coaching. So I've got lots of students where I just meet with them for an hour once a month. The church pays for it. And I watch your service. It's kind of coachy. It's not. It's got some spiritual direction elements, but it's very much like, hey, let's set goals. What are we doing next month? Patrick just did this getaway with your worship team. What does it look like to do that in 2024? Book a cabin and invite everybody, right? Yep. So one-on-one worship coaching. Been doing that for a minute. So yeah, just reach out to me on my website, and I'll respond to you. So thanks for having me, Patrick.
And what is the website?
3 Streams Worship Training, or it might just be 3streamsworship.com. That's it. I should probably know my own website, right?
Yeah, I was about to say, first lesson is you kind of have to figure out what Mike's website is.
3streamsworship.com. 3 Streams Worship. That's it.
That's great, man. Thank you so much for being here. It's a treat to hear from a fellow worship pastor, worship leader, worship developer, because everything you shared is so, I'm just going to say it was so rich, and I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, praise God. Thanks for having me, Patrick. Appreciate you.
Awesome.
Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to the podcast, and thank you, Mike, for joining us today. Don't forget, every applicable link that you might need can be found down in the description. Please share this podcast. Let me know what questions you have in the comments. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next one.